Now looking back, there was a pivotal point where it became less of a casual thing and more of a full-blown addiction. I started smoking weed when I was 15 years old. I just recently turned 37 and I just quit 3 months ago to be exact. In this video, I want to share what that experience has been like, how and why. By no means am I trying to preach and tell people how and why they should quit or anything like that. Even if you're considering it, starting or quitting, that's not what this is about. More so just to open up to my experience. This video is definitely not made for kids or anything like that as well. So disclaimer, if you're young, super young, and you don't know what I'm talking about right now, just click away and watch a different video. I've also never have openly shared my use of cannabis or anything like that. I've never shared it on Instagram, social media of any kind, to be honest. So this is the first time I've actually talked about it, which is kind of making me very nervous, to be honest. That's why I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, really cool DIY spot. We'll get into some skating in a little bit, but yeah, I think the stigma around cannabis has changed over the last couple years. So hopefully before you judge me or anything like that, you can just hear me out, understand where I'm coming from and how I got to the space where I am now. I'm also in California, born and raised in California. So that does play a big role on just the legality of cannabis and weed in general. My intention is not to preach to people and tell them like what and how they should do with their life. Is more so just to kind of have a candid conversation around my use and open up about it, because maybe it will inspire other people in some way, shape, or form, but by no means do I intentionally want to manipulate people. Originally, when I was young, I thought it was so lame. I was like, that stuff is so bad. It's kind of the same way that I view drinking too. I was just like, that stuff is so lame. Like, who would want to use cannabis or who would want to do drugs of any kind, any sort? But like a lot of people, eventually I did get sucked into it, and that is my own fault. Let me make that clear right now. I am gonna reference some situations where I got more invested into smoking, but by no means is it anybody else's fault. Of course, you can blame peer pressure and all that stuff, but that's not the intention. So the first time I actually smoked weed was in front of a skate park with some of the older heads that had a car, basically. That's where we smoked for the first time. Nobody had a house or anything like that yet, but basically they had their driver's license, parked out front of a skate park. They started smoking out of this like bubbler situation, and I casually joined the session. It's pretty funny because they asked me if I'd smoked or anything like that. I was like, oh yeah, I had smoked, and I just didn't want to seem like awkward or weird, and I just wanted to fit in. And I joined the session, I smoked, and honestly, it didn't really affect me the way that I thought it would affect me, like how you see in movies or anything like that. It really just didn't mess with me that much. And I heard this from other people too, like first time smoking weed, like it didn't really get them that high. But eventually, as I got into high school, I started smoking all the time. It became part of my regular routine. Like I would basically smoke and then skate and then smoke. It was just something you did almost as like this social thing as well. But eventually that just became part of my regular routine. Smoke, skate, smoke. Now in high school, at one point I did get caught with weed at my house when I was living with my parents, and they weren't very happy about it. So by no means was it like something that was super acceptable in my family, like it is sometimes in some families nowadays. You know, throughout high school I started smoking more, and by the end of high school it was a regular old thing. Now looking back, there was a pivotal point where it became less of a casual thing and more of a full-blown addiction. I moved out of my parents' house and started renting a place where I had a roommate that sold weed. It was a very typical situation where people were coming over to smoke every couple hours. I won't drag on my experience about how I eventually was addicted. Even saying that out loud sounds pretty weird because it took me a long time to realize, in fact, I was addicted. And let's be honest, there's way, way worse things to be addicted to, but that's not a reason to justify anything. Now there is one pivotal moment which I think is very important to share. It's kind of something I'm ashamed of to even share. It's kind of crazy to say it out loud, but I remember the first time like it was yesterday. I was at my friend's house. We were about to go on a skate trip. He was from Australia. He used to always mix weed and tobacco together. I guess that's just how he always done it in the past. And yeah, he was like, come on, just try it out, just see how it feels. I tried it out, and that was the beginning of it. It was like the beginning of doubling down on my high with tobacco and weed. It was crazy. It was a really good feeling, I'm not gonna lie. Ever since then, I sort of just adopted that, doubling down on my high. And it was such a crazy good feeling, just like really escaping, feeling so relaxed. Making spliffs. Every skater knows about a spliff, I feel like, at this point. But the point is, like, that was the first time where I was really introduced to mixing the two. Before that, I thought it was gross. I never smoked cigarettes or anything like that. Essentially, what I'm getting at is that's when I started really using both together, which created a whole new addiction. Again, this is hindsight, but up until that point, I thought the idea of mixing weed and tobacco was disgusting. But for some reason, I wanted to try it. When you're young, you try different things, and I think you should try different things when you're young to find out what you like and you don't like. I tended to really like it. I won't drag on the whole process of how it formed, but I do want to try to address when I realized that I needed to stop. Fast forward to about a year ago. I know that is a really long time of smoking that I'm leaving a gap out of. But this is when I started to realize that I was fully addicted, and it became a problem because I would basically smoke before there was any task that I just didn't want to do, and I would smoke after. So it was sort of like this reward sort of system that I would do for myself, and it was a way to justify things. So if there was a hard task that I just didn't want to do, I'd smoke beforehand, and sometimes I would just neglect the task altogether, but it was a way to sort of just like motivate me, but actually it was a discouragement. I was like, all right, I need to mow the lawn, I need to do all these basically all these tasks. I'd be like, all right, I'll smoke before and I'll smoke after, and that would like encourage me, give me some motivation to do it. Now essentially I got to a place where I just felt like I wasn't getting enough done with my life. It's kind of like getting a little depressed, and I go to therapy, all sorts of things, but I think the smoking was just like really doubling all that down. Like it was just not allowing me to feel how I really wanted to feel. I sort of felt like disabled in a weird way. Like there was this disability that I had. Like I was just so reliant on something, and I got to a point where I didn't want to be reliant on anything, whether it be skateboarding, whether it be relationships, anything. I just want to be able to be like self-reliant on my mind and not on any kind of substance, essentially. The combination of all these different things basically got me to a point where I was like, all right, I do want to quit. I need to make a plan. How do I get out of this space of just being fully addicted to this thing that I love, but I don't want to love, essentially? So I made a plan, and it started something like this. I basically said, all right, I'm gonna go to the dispensary. I'm gonna pick up my last bag of weed. I know this sounds ridiculous, and it's like very stereotypical. I feel like for any drug, people do this, like, oh, I'm gonna get the last one, and sometimes that is the very last one. Essentially what I'm getting at is I went to the store, got my last bag of weed, and when I got it, I almost had this negative feeling. Like right when I got it, I was just like, crap, here we go again. Like, am I gonna draw myself in? And I kept reminding myself, like every time when I smoked, I just had this negative feeling every time. I still liked it, enjoyed the process, but afterwards I just felt like, what are you doing? What are you doing? By the end of that, it was sort of a good feeling, if that makes sense. I started to build a negative association with the one thing that I was really addicted to, which I think is the only way you can get out of something that you're addicted to. Nobody can tell you what to do or anything like that. You yourself have to want to quit the thing. And I did want to quit, but I think just building that negative association was the biggest motivator to actually pull the plug. I just want to make sure I keep saying that. Like, by no means am I trying to tell people what to do, because I think ultimately, like, people are going to do what they want to do. Whether you don't or do want to do something, it's really your choice at the end of the day. So you can know all the facts and the good and the bad about anything, but ultimately, unless you individually want to make that decision, then you're just not going to. I think the final nail in the coffin was like right when I finished that, me and my wife had a vacation plan where we went to a place where weed wasn't really available, and if it was available, it was probably like crap weed, and honestly, like, had such a high tolerance, I wouldn't really consider smoking things that were just complete trash, because it was like pointless. Like, I wouldn't even get high. I've been smoking so much good weed for so long that like crap weed would just not do the trick. If anything, it would just like make me feel like crap. So that combination of like calling myself off and then going to a place where it wasn't available, I think really did sort of like put the nail in the coffin. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some points where I really did want to smoke after that, but I think the combination, the timeline of those events is what really helped me. When I got home from that vacation, it was so hard to get to sleep at this point. Now, while I was on vacation, I was just doing things all day long. We were so like just active. By the end of the day, I could get to sleep. It was still hard, but when I got back and just knowing I had that routine that I could get back to, it was really hard to get to bed. I think that was the hardest thing about the end of smoking weed in general, is like going to sleep. There were so many nights where I just like couldn't go to bed. Like, I'm talking like maybe I'd sleep for an hour or two. It was really difficult, and it was very tempting to just smoke and fall back to sleep, because when I was smoking, I would fall to sleep in a second. It was almost like this form of meditation, and I'm not gonna lie, I do miss that a little bit. I would just almost turn the lights off mentally, and there would be no thinking, and I would just fall asleep in a second, right when I laid my head down on the pillow. Keep in mind that I was smoking weed and tobacco at the same time, and I quit both at the same time. So there's like a bunch of different things going on there. I'm not a scientist by any means. I don't know what's neurologically going on. I just know what I was experiencing throughout my body. I had to replace those things with something positive. That's how it worked for me. So I would take a lot of walks, go skate. I would just distract myself. I'd make a lot of food. I was eating a lot of snacks. Whenever I had that urge, I would try to replace it with something else and distract my mind so that I wasn't just sitting there thinking about it.
This is one of those areas where I'm not going to be able to hear me so good, so we'll keep the dialogue brief, but there's a lot of temptation, of course. Like, that's the hardest thing about quitting smoking or quitting anything that's substance, basically, is like having these moments where you're like, everyone else is getting high, they're enjoying their time. It looks really nice, but now at this point, like in my journey of like not smoking anymore, I really have no desire. So even though like people are offering me and everyone else is kind of doing their thing, indulging, if I'm going to be honest, I have no desire for it. It's taken a long time to build that though.
Now, ultimately, I think it was just an accumulation of making myself feel guilty for smoking, whether it's a good or bad thing. I don't know. I'm just being honest. Like, I just felt guilty for the idea of it. And the other thing is I really started, as I'm now 37 years old, started to realize like how much I've been forgetting. I used to have such a good memory, but now like people bring up skate trips or things we've done together and I have no recollection of it. Point is, I didn't want to feel that way anymore. I didn't want to be reliant on something that I was so reliant on. I also wanted to remember how cool life is. Like, it sounds corny as shit, but like I would just forget the most simple things. And like even full-blown skate trips, I'd forget everything that happened on those skate trips and people would bring it up. And I just was like, man, I really want to be able to remember those. But in my opinion, I think a lot of it was because I was super stoned that whole time. Many of those events and many of those things I'll probably never remember. Like, I don't think not smoking now is going to make me remember them, but into the future, I do want to remember things. Like, from here on out, I don't want to have this feeling of like almost just insecurity in a way. Like, whoa, was that me? What was I doing? Whatever, you know, like I want to actually remember what was going on. And I think as you get older, memory's going to get harder. So yeah, I don't want to make it harder. I want to make it a little bit easier. One thing is definitely for sure, I feel like I have just more stamina in general. So we're out here right now, it's like 90 something degrees skating. I'm gonna go to a waterfall in a little bit, but that is something to just kind of like take in and just think about. It's like, I don't know, for me at least, I feel like I can just last so much longer now. Things don't, I don't know, don't take the breath out of me as fast. Essentially, I felt like I was going through this like withdrawal period. Like I was just not able to get to sleep. I was taking melatonin and all the different like sleep supplements. Most of them actually kept me awake more than they helped me get to sleep. And I just kept reminding myself like over time, I'm gonna be able to get to sleep. I don't know what's going on, but about 2.5 weeks later, I started finally getting some really, really good sleep. It wasn't that dead sleep where I just hit the pillow and just be dead from smoking, but it was a sleep where I felt like I was just in a deeper sleep, if that makes sense. At least that's what it seemed like. When I woke up, I was more refreshed than when I would normally smoke every day or every night and then just feel kind of groggy in the morning. The other thing is I started to have dreams, pretty vivid dreams here. I hadn't had dreams since I was a child. Honestly, since I started smoking, it's not something I thought about, but I started to have these crazy dreams. It's like I couldn't remember the last time I had a dream. And I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up, that it was a wild feeling having these vivid dreams after not having them for over like 22 years. One of the hardest things is, you know, knowing that you can do this thing, you know the feeling of it, you know like how great it is, but like once you build that resistance of just saying no, it's a pretty like liberating feeling. It sounds corny if you haven't quit anything, I don't know. Might sound kind of like preachy, but it does feel really good. Like you feel just more self-control, essentially is what I'm getting at, and that is like a good feeling. And then ultimately, like right now, I'm hiking all day. I really am like not out of breath or anything like that. Like I know you can take gummies. It's another way so you're not really smoking, but we'll get some more into that. We are gonna kind of dive down and hit this full pipe, so we'll get some more into the topic, but I'm excited to be back here. I do want to be very intentional and like not make people feel bad, because addiction is a real thing. And people might say, hey, weed is nothing, like I'm addicted to way worse things, and you're not wrong in that. I don't think people can simply just choose not to be addicted to something. I think there's definitely like a neurological chemical that's being balanced or imbalanced. So I just do want to kind of stop and take a minute to acknowledge that it's not as easy as being like, hey, I'm ashamed of myself and all the things that I've said and just quit. Like, I think everybody has their own experience with addiction. For me, I think a lot of it was just building that negative association with it for myself. I have no negative association for other people that smoke. Most of my friends do smoke, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let me make that clear. Addiction isn't a choice, essentially is what I'm getting at. It's something that just happens over the course of time, whether it's because you want to escape your reality or whatever it may be. Addiction is real. It's not a choice that you just make. fear is here. This full pipe is so sick. Sometimes there's like a ladder or rope down here, but we're not too prepared.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. Like normally you would get back up because there'd be like some kind of rope tied to something. That's the hard part. Because I remember you fell down in there a couple times.
Yeah, I did. And
You like intentionally ran down it at one point.
I wanted to ride down it. I wanted to do a trick, power slide, ride down. Really?
If I had to boil down how to quit in a very short summary, it was the guilt and shame I was feeling for myself, the desire to change my productivity, the desire to change my physical ability to be able to skate better, and wanting to mentally feel more stable. Ultimately, it came down to me wanting to quit and putting together a plan to stop. Creating the negative association with smoking is what ultimately allowed me to continue this chapter of not smoking at all. That didn't come until about a month of not smoking. I definitely had the itch for quite a while. Eventually it did go away. Whenever I think about the prospect of smoking, I have such a negative reaction that I really leaned into. Who knows, I might slip up one day, but I feel like I have a good control over my desires. By no means do I think everyone should quit weed or whatever it is that brings them joy in life and escaping things, whether it be drinking or whatever. Like, I don't drink either, but we're not gonna get into all that. In this video, I have a whole different explanation for that. Whenever I have the temptation of smoking, it's like I have this negative reaction to it now. Like when we're hiking, going to the waterfalls, going to like all these situations where it sounds really nice, especially when you're in these like very remote, relaxing environments with your friends and just chilling out in nature. Like it sounds nice, I'm not gonna lie, in theory, but then when I start thinking of like the idea of actually being high and being stoned in those vibes, I'm like, I just don't have the desire anymore. It just doesn't sound fun to me. Like what sounds fun is just like being there and being the moment and like almost like this form of like meditation without smoking now. I think it's because I smoked for so long, it really didn't bring me that sense of meditation anymore. It just like put me to this place of like not thinking at all and escaping. I know that's a form of meditation, but I think there's also this form of like just being in the moment. I think when you're super stoned, at least in my opinion, when I was super stoned, I just didn't feel like I was in the moment. I was just like in a whole different place. So now when I'm in the moment or in this really cool environment with cool people doing cool things, I just really want to embrace that moment and like look around and see things and not be escaping it, essentially. I'm not saying other people are escaping it, that's just my personal journey and experience. So ultimately, I just want to be very like conscious and like aware and like be in the moment. Again, I think like especially nowadays with like so much distractions that we have, whether it be the phone or whether it be just the harsh reality of the world, and I don't want to be escaping and falling into these traps. I just want to be very conscious and like very intentional with what I do, where I spend my time, what I put my energy into. So I think that is like a big reason of why I quit. I want to be very intentional with everything I do in my life at this point. 37 years old, it sounds so crazy to me, like I don't feel 37, by the way. I'm not trying to make myself seem like I'm old or paint that picture. I'm just saying it's wild to me that I've made it this far, and I don't know, now I just want to be like more thankful and conscious of reality. I do want to share some of the benefits before we get to the end of this video, because I think there has been a lot of benefits that I never really even thought I would get. Like I was saying earlier, dreaming has been amazing. It's almost like my new high. I know that's going to sound super cringy and corny or whatever, but the crazy things happen in my dreams are so amazing. That alone has been such a huge benefit. I just feel like I have a much more creative mind. You think weed like would make you more creative, but in my opinion, like it made me less creative towards the last couple years. I just feel like I'm living more authentic and comfortable with my thoughts. Therapy has also helped me understand why I was smoking in the first place. My physical abilities in skating has improved. I have way more energy and stamina in general. I feel like I could skate a lot longer than I was in the past. Hiking longer, doing things, I just have more endurance in general. My mood has been much more stable. I think that's like one of the biggest factors too that I've realized is like, I think smoking a lot of times for me was a way to sort of escape my feelings and escape things that were going on. And obviously, like I said, I go to therapy, and that sort of helped me realize why I was smoking in many ways. I started talking about it more and more. But I think my mood overall is much more stable. Like it's less high and lows. I feel like there's less just contrast in general. When something really intense happens, maybe someone like, I don't know, say someone like rear-ended me and then someone flicked me off, then like punched me in the face or something. Like that's a really extreme example. Before I'd just be so reactionary. Now I just feel like I will have a better realization of like, oh, that person made a mistake, that rear-ended me is probably on their phone. All good, you know what I mean? The person that hit me, they're probably just angry because of what's going on in their life. So what I'm saying is like, I just feel like I have more healthy perception of just like other people's reality and the reality that we live in, which ultimately makes me feel like I can just have more of a stable mood, not just based off other people's reactions of what they do around me, but like whatever it is, something that I do, maybe like, I don't know, I spill a coffee that I just got while I was skating, like instead of getting mad and frustrated about it, I feel like I could just laugh it off. Yeah, I think it also goes into anxiety as well. Overall, I just feel like my patience is much more stronger. I stay a little more even-keeled without overthinking situations. The memory is getting better, I think. This is something I think forever I'll have to work on, and forever I'll have disadvantages because of the length of smoking experience. And I'm optimistic that 10 years from now, I will start remembering things. So that's the ultimate goal, is like taking all these things and, I don't know, running with them. Like, who knows, I might slip up one day, maybe I'll smoke again. I don't know, for now, it feels like really good just to have like more control of my own actions and myself, the mood, the dreaming, just overall my friendships, my relationships with other people, like everything just feels like more positive. I don't want to be like this toxic positivity person, but I think if you have like a better perception of the world and you're more empathetic and just more accepting of things around you and people, like ultimately life is a little lighter. It's not as heavy. And I think that's been my experience. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Probably rambled on for quite a while. Let me know if you experience any of these same things that I've experienced, or have any more context to add to this conversation. I love this community here. I want to make an updated video about like my experience with anxiety and smoking as well, because I didn't get too much into that in this video. I did a little bit, but essentially there's a lot to take away from that as well. I feel like I have much less anxiety. It still exists, don't get me wrong. That's why I'm out here talking in the middle of nowhere where nobody else is around, so I don't have to deal with any kind of social anxiety. But anyways, I've ranted long enough. I love y'all. MASH.